On October 27, 1962, a Soviet submarine named B-59 was sitting in the Caribbean Sea, out of radio contact, being bombarded by depth charges from American warships above. The crew had no way of knowing the charges were practice rounds, signals meant to force them to surface. They thought that World War III had started. Inside that submarine, the temperature had climbed to over 60 degrees Celsius. Carbon dioxide was building up. Men were losing consciousness, and the captain, Valentin Savitsky, made a decision. They were going to launch their nuclear torpedo. A Soviet nuclear torpedo in the Caribbean in 1962 would almost certainly have triggered a full nuclear exchange. Hundreds of millions dead within hours. Civilization as a functioning structure, gone. To authorize the launch, all 3 senior officers had to agree. 2 said yes. The third, a man named Vasily Arkhipov, said no. And that's why you're here. One man, one word. On a submarine nobody knew about during the most dangerous 13 days in human history. What happened on B-59 isn't an isolated story. It's a pattern. And once you see it, the history of human survival starts to look very different from what you were taught. The pattern is this. At the moments when extinction was closest, the variable that determined everything wasn't military power, or technology, or collective human will. It was a single person, in a room or a vehicle or a control center, making a decision that the rest of the world would never hear about unless something went wrong. Geneticists call the biological version of this a bottleneck, a point where a population is squeezed so severely that only a handful of individuals carry the entire species forward. What history shows us is that humanity has had both kinds, the biological ones and the human ones. If you want to understand how close the edge actually is, and how often we've been there, subscribe. We cover this kind of thing every week. The biological bottleneck happened roughly 74,000 years ago, and it's written into your DNA right now. A supervolcanic eruption at Lake Toba, in what is now Sumatra, produced the largest volcanic event in the last 2 million years. The eruption ejected approximately 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. The ash cloud blocked sunlight globally for years, triggering what researchers call a volcanic winter. Temperatures dropped. Food chains collapsed. Stanley Ambrose at the University of Illinois published research in 1998 showing that genetic diversity in modern humans is extraordinarily low, far lower than in other great apes, including chimpanzees. A chimpanzee population in a single forest can carry more genetic diversity than all 8 billion humans alive today. The most widely supported explanation is that our entire species passed through a bottleneck after Toba so severe that the global human population may have dropped to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Every person alive today descended from that group. That small, scattered, barely surviving group. If any single regional population had been wiped out in those years, a drought, a disease, a failed harvest, the chain breaks. We don't recover. There is no second branch. Then there's Stanislav Petrov. September 26, 1983. A Soviet early warning station south of Moscow received a signal. The system was reporting that the United States had launched 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Petrov was the duty officer. Protocol was clear. He was to report the launch immediately, which would trigger a Soviet response. He had minutes. He didn't report it. His reasoning, as he later described it, was a gut feeling. 5 missiles didn't make sense as a first strike. A real attack would be hundreds. He classified it as a system malfunction and waited. He was right. It was a satellite error caused by a rare alignment of sunlight on high-altitude clouds. But he didn't know that when he made the call. He made it on instinct, under pressure, in the middle of the night, in a room full of people telling him the signal was real. The Soviet government never acknowledged what he'd done. He was quietly reprimanded for improper record-keeping. The world learned his name only after the Cold War ended. Thomas Blanton of the National Security Archive called him, without hyperbole, the man who saved the world. 2 men, 2 decisions. Neither was elected. Neither was famous. Neither was operating with complete information. The fate of the species ran through them anyway. Here's what should genuinely unsettle you. We have built systems so large and so complex that their failure modes are beyond any one person's ability to fully understand. And yet, every time we have come closest to the edge, survival has depended on exactly one person understanding something that the system missed. The Toba survivors didn't know they were the last ones. Arkhipov didn't know he was making a civilizational decision. Petrov didn't know his name would eventually be in history books. They were just people, in impossible situations, doing the only thing they could think to do. That's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all of this. The margin between survival and extinction has never been as wide as we like to believe. It has been, repeatedly and without our knowledge, the width of one person's judgment in one specific moment. The world you woke up in today exists because those judgments landed correctly. There's no guarantee the next ones will. If this changed how you think about how close we've actually come, drop a comment. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them.